call the meeting, the November 12th, 2024, Jonathan Alder School Board meeting to order. Can we start with Pledge of Allegiance, please? The Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mrs. Walker.
Here.
Mr. McCartney.
Here.
Mr. Hooley. Here. Stetweiler.
Here.
Mr. Votop. Here.
Let's take a moment for silent prayer and meditation. Thank you. Moving on to section 2 of the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the November 12th, 2024 agenda?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Stetweiler.
Yes.
Mr. Hooley.
Yes.
Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Mr. Votop.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Section 3, moving on, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the October 21st, 2024 regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Votop.
Yes.
Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Mr. Hooley.
Yes.
Mrs. Stetweiler.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to section 4, 4.01, superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. I have several updates for the board this evening, and I wanted to start with our community advisory team 3 of 4 last week. We had over 60 community members with us, and in my opinion that there was a significant mindset shift from the third CAC compared to the first 2. I reported to the board last month that the first community advisory team meeting, it was a lot of information. It was overwhelming. There were multiple presentations, a lot of data with the enrollment and projections. The village spoke about development and how they handle that development, and I think it was just a lot to grasp during that first meeting. The second meeting, Mr. Ingles did a good job at communicating the financial state of the district. Josh went into options for master facility planning, and I still feel that it was a lot of information to comprehend during those first 2 meetings. But last week, and Mrs. Walker, Mr. McCartney can correct me if I'm wrong, this group came with a different mindset. It was, okay, we understand the obstacle ahead of us, we know the challenges, and we know how important this work is, and it was really, let's put our heads together and let's rule out some of the options that's not fit for the district. It was really neat to see it. I was, for the most part, just with one group, and I really sensed that in my group, and there was 4 other groups eliminating other facility plans that just wasn't a right fit for what we're looking for the future of this district. But I was just really impressed with the progress that we made last week. We're down to 4, I would like to say 3 master facility options for the board. And I'm hoping on the 26th of November to have a working session with this board so that we can bring Josh in and really talk through the particulars on what is best for the district moving forward. As you know, this has been a family theme, and this plan is going to be one that impacts all of our families for decades of learning, so I'm really excited about that work. I just drove by 340 West Main, the old Plain City elementary building, about an hour ago. This building is almost to the ground. A section that's last remaining is the most forward to the left corner. The second story is already down. So for the next month, the excavator operator is going to be pulling cement out of the ground, and it's going to be about a month of hauling the rubble away. But I'm really confident that we're going to have this project wrapped up before the winter time. I wanted to announce, this is really exciting for Mr. Ingles and myself. If you go back about 2 years ago, whenever I was first working with the Jonathan Alder Strategic Planning Committee, we talked about aid and support to help the district cover the costs of this project. This is a very expensive project. Over a year ago, we started an application process with Madison County, who applies for a site revitalization grant program, and Madison County was awarded $500,000. We're recipients of that. We're expecting to receive majority of that $500,000, which will cover more than 50% of the cost of this demolition, so we're really excited about that. I also wanted to announce to the public that I know that this has been an emotional process, seeing this building go down in the heart of Plain City. And when I went before the original Plain City Design Review Board, the original plans had never changed from over a year ago about if the village and that Design Review Board allows us to bring this building down and we can replace it with a grass area for the community to share, we will work in collaboration with the village on school space, school use, community shared space, and green space. That's what was communicated. We never deviated from that plan. So we're just going through the process in the step. First, approval of the demolition, then the green space, then work in collaboration with the village on what school space and community shared space looks like. So I wanted to emphasize that to the school board this evening. And then negotiations. I've kept the board advised on this process over the last couple months, and I'm just so encouraged with the work and the agreement that sits before the board this evening. I wanted to especially thank a group of educators that are with us this evening: Mrs. Nicole Lorenz, Mr. Justin Hennig, Mrs. Mandy Craig, Mr. Gaston Green, Mrs. Lori Kersey, Mrs. Tammy Tarr, Mrs. Rachel Crespo, Mrs. Maren Ohl, and the board's team, Mrs. Crawl, Mrs. Quick, Treasurer Ingles, Mrs. Walker, and Mr. McCartney. The process used to reach this agreement was effective and it was efficient. It was a pleasurable process. Relationships were formed, trust was formed. So I'm really excited that you get to take action on this agreement. That will be a teacher contract and agreement from 25 through 2028. Mrs. Lorenz, what I thought we would do is get through some of the presentations early on, and when the board is taking action on this item, I would like to call you up to see if you would address the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mrs. Walker, that's all from my report.
Thank you.
And I can go right into our excellence in action if you approve.
Sure.
Mrs. Maren Ohl, High School History and Advisory Coordinator. Can you come forward so we can recognize you? I'm going to stand right here beside me.
Sure.
I'm going to read a few things that your colleagues have submitted, okay? Mrs. Ohl, High School History and Advisory Coordinator. She's in charge of the advisory program at the high school, which has elevated student success greatly. Last year, the high school surpassed our building goal of reducing failing grades in classes by 10%. Her leadership and organization paved the way for the high school to improve their overall grades, student overall grades, by 32% last year, a significant improvement from the previous year without advisory. One of the main differences between these two school years was the advisory program, of which Maren is the high school coordinator. Advisory goes with both elevate and family because advisory has helped to elevate our student success as evidenced by the reduced failing grades, but also give students a place to belong and find a family within the school day, especially if they don't already have that through their extracurricular activities. Maren's work in communicating clear expectations for this time period, providing resources for getting to know each other, family, as well as academic support, elevating student success, she has been instrumental in this program's success. It has been a huge help for students who are at risk of failing or need targeted interventions. Maren is a dedicated teacher and colleague. She continually works to make her U.S. history classes as engaging as possible, and she truly works to know every student and meet them where they are. She's pursued her own training on EL education to support our EL students, and she consistently engages in conversations with colleagues about students in order to figure out how to best support them in formal meetings, but also more informal times like lunch. Marin is also an incredibly supportive colleague, both formally as a RESA mentor and informally as a hallway neighbor and lunch colleague, and truly raises her colleagues up with words of encouragement, recognition, and support. Students respect her and want to learn from her, and so do her colleagues. Congratulations, Mrs. Old.
You guys will appreciate this. We were at OSBA yesterday, and during the business meeting, there was a legislative platform change. Big screen, 450 people, and they were very much struggling to make live edits. And Sonia looks over at me and goes, "They need Marin here."
Yes. All right, here goes. 3, 2, 1. Perfect.
Congratulations.
Okay, 5.02, the Auditor of State Award.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Scott Brown. He's liaison from the auditor's office, and Laura and Mindy can come up.
I'm going to stand here, you want me to stand up there? Would you like me to stand here?
You're fine right there.
Yeah. Come up, guys. So Mr. Brown has something to say, then I'm going to talk about Mindy and Laura and the great work they've been doing.
Okay. So thank you for giving me a few moments to speak this evening. My name is Scott Brown, and I serve as State Auditor Keith Faber's Central Ohio Liaison. Usually that means I'm your first phone call, or as some of us downstairs know, I'm the guy who makes the phone call to get the door unlocked. So it works both ways, right? It's my honor to be here this evening on behalf of the State Auditor to present the Auditor of State Award with distinction to the Jonathan Alder Local School District. It's important to note that this award puts Jonathan Alder in a very select group. Annually, the State Auditor's Office conducts 4,500 audits statewide. Of all those audits, you've landed in the top 4% with this award. The Auditor of State Award is presented to local governments and school districts upon the completion of a financial audit that meet the following criteria defined as a clean audit, as he knows, as a short audit letter, right?
Yes,
That's a good thing. The entity must file financial reports with the auditor's office by a statutory due date without extension via the Ingles system and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The audit report does not contain any findings for recovery, material citations, material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, uniform guidance findings, or other question costs. This award really represents the hard work of the school's administrative staff, the board, and employees who make every effort each day to attain accounting excellence. We'd also like to recognize the fiscal office that has done an outstanding job watching over every dollar. Specifically, we want to recognize Treasurer and CFO Mark Ingles. No, this was a last minute thing on a printer that wasn't working at my house. Treasurer Mark Ingles for his leadership, professionalism, and exceptional commitment to fiscal integrity. So on behalf of State Auditor Keith Faber, I'd like to present Jonathan Alder Local School District the Auditor of State Award with distinction. I'm going to step over here because I know you're going to say that.
Yeah, so actually, even though my name's on this award, it really belongs to these two. Mindy and Laura are our treasurer's office staff. They work tirelessly every day to help not just me, but everyone in the staff to get what they need resource-wise in the classroom, make sure the paychecks are correct, help them with their benefits. They've been invaluable help for me coming into a new district, made my transition a lot smoother and easier. I just want to say a couple things about them. Laura, Mrs. Kane, has been here for 2 years now with the district. Her anniversary was just a couple days ago. She handles our payroll and benefits. Since I've joined the office, she has embraced our efforts to be more efficient and effective in our payroll processing, and also has taken upon herself to learn more about the job, to attend trainings, and just be just develop into a strong payroll coordinator. I'm very happy to work with her and everything she's doing. Mindy Airy, I think everyone in this room knows Mindy. She's been with the district for 22 years, so she is on, is it 3 superintendents?
Yes.
3 superintendents, 3 or 4 treasurers. She handles our accounts payable, receivable, she helps onboard our personnel, and she also does a major role in our EMIS data reporting. She is known as a jack of all trades. If you ever need anything through the district, Mindy is usually your go-to. She's very detail-oriented and has the strong institutional knowledge that is required for us to keep operating at a high level. So I really want to thank them for all their work. Very lucky to have them. Make my job easier, and also just the great work you guys are doing for the district. So I want to publicly acknowledge you.
Why don't you guys move your way to the middle there?
Laura.
Thank you, Karen.
All right, here we go. And 3, 2, 1. Took several, so hopefully everyone's eyes are open.
Thank you, Tyler.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Mindy.
Thank you.
The award recognition parts are my favorite parts of the school board meeting, and I just want to say, Mrs. Ohl, Mrs. Airy, Mrs. Kane, did they already leave?
That's why Mark likes them so much.
Just thank you. Thank you. They should be leaving at this point.
They like to
Thank
be
you.
behind the scenes.
Yeah.
They put in a full day.
Yeah, for sure, they deserve to go. But if you see them, can you let them know that we, as a board, really appreciate everything they do, and Mrs. Old, same thing to you. Thank you. Okay, 5.03.
So we have some very important and valuable partners to the district with us this evening. Mrs. Wood and Mrs. Brockman. I don't think Mrs. Hicks is with us, but I've asked Mrs. Carla Quick to introduce them, and they had a small piece for us this evening.
Yeah. Well, I am so grateful for this opportunity to recognize our Jonathan Alder Education Foundation. I just want to share a few things. We are so fortunate that we have a foundation that we can partner with to provide opportunities for both our students and our staff members that allow us to go above and beyond. This year, the foundation has made contributions to the district that have paid for things like online and STEM programming, and we're getting ready to partner with the foundation for a very special event here in the district on November 26th. We are bringing a very special visitor named Chris Nickich. If you haven't learned about Chris yet, I would recommend that everyone take 10 to 15 minutes to learn who Chris Nickich is. He is going to be amazing, and we could not have done this without the support of our foundation. Chris is an author, speaker, the first person in the world with Down syndrome to complete an Ironman. He's also run all 6 global marathon majors, won 2 ESPY awards, and become a global ambassador for the Special Olympics. And Chris is coming to share his story with all of our students in grades 5 through 12 using a program called the 1% Better program. So it's really all about getting 1% better every single day. And our foundation is allowing this to happen for our students. So we just can't tell you how grateful we are for your support. The partnership with the foundation is going to allow us to further our future-ready learning and wellness initiatives in the district, which are so important to all of us. So I want to introduce, Dr. Miller already had the opportunity to do this, but 2 of our former JA educators, Cheryl Brockman and Meg Wood. Kelly Hicks was a former educator and principal here in the district. But they're gonna come up and share a little bit more about the foundation and what it offers to our staff and students, and how you can get involved if you'd like. So, Meg and Cheryl, thank you.
Thanks, Carla. We met with Carla a few weeks ago about the foundation, and she wanted to know the history of the foundation. And we just became involved a couple years ago. So I reached out to Jeremy May, who's sitting in the back row there. His father was very instrumental in starting it, and I said, help us understand the foundation. And what he shared with us, about 30 years ago, a gentleman named Walter Wally, who is a direct descendant of Jonathan Alder, reached out to the district and wanted to make a donation. And there was no source to just take donations like that. And Jeremy's father, Jerry May, was on the school board at that time, and he offered to set up this, the Jonathan Alder Education Foundation, to receive donations. And so Jerry May, along with other business leaders in the community, kind of formed a committee. They reached out to people and took in donations for things that the superintendent wasn't able to provide, those things that go above and beyond. I became involved with the foundation in 2002 when I was a teacher. I lost a dear friend, colleague, Kim Baldridge, died suddenly, and I wanted to start a scholarship in her memory along with some other colleagues, and I reached out to the treasurer. She said, you have to go through the foundation. So I started working with Jerry May, and he would take our donations. He was like the liaison between the student and the college and sent checks. And since that time, there are other people who have started scholarships, including one that Jeremy and his family started in Jerry May's memory. Eventually, Jeremy helped with the foundation for a while, and then John Adams took over the foundation. And at the end of 2021, John kind of realized that there was a lot more. Jerry had a great financial background. That was his career. So he was able to offer his services for free, kind of as a gift to the district. And John realized that we really needed somebody with more financial background. So he turned to the Union County Foundation, and we kind of became under that umbrella, mainly because Madison County doesn't have a foundation like that, and Union County already works with Marysville and Fairbanks, and so they kind of took us in, and then John turned it over to Meg Kelly and I, and we, for the first year, really had no idea what we were doing. And that was Dr. Miller's first year. We met with him, and so we were all just kind of fumbling through. And one thing we did learn is that students were not finding out about scholarships, and that was really important to us. We have all the scholarship money. There are we have the teacher scholarship. Different students have passed away and their parents have donated money to the foundation. Chad Gilmore's parents, Blake Lee's parents. There's one in memory of David Parker. Tim Brink was a football coach a few years ago. He wanted to start a scholarship. This year we have Ann Gorman and Judy Walker, also now part of the foundations and offering scholarships. So we've been working in the last year with Union County Foundation. We now have all the scholarships online. They made magnets for every senior. They're in the lockers with QR codes. So if you want to apply to any of those scholarships, you can just go to that link. And so we're hoping that more students apply. And the other part of the foundation is the part that Carla mentioned, where we have like a general fund that the district can use for various activities that just don't fit, like the wonderful speaker. Carla called me. I was doing a part-time job, and she's like, going on and on. I'm like, Carla, that sounds great. She kept going and going and going because she was so excited about the speaker. I'm like, Carla, I'll talk to Megan Kelly. I'm sure they're going to agree with me that this is a great idea. But no, I have to tell you more. And she kept going.
Doesn't sound like me, I know.
So we're glad we're able to make this work. We also have a anonymous donor that donates generously and has for a long time to technology, and Nicole's been able to use that money for many projects over the year. The biggest thing we need help with right now is, over the years, people no longer know about the scholarship. Carla said, I've never heard of it. She's lived in the community all her life. And Meg's gonna pass out, we have with, thank you, Tyler's help. He created this, recreated our brochure. So sorry, Tyler. But we just need people to know that we exist. If they're looking for a tax deduction, it's a great way to give money. As people are, making out their wills, if they want to do some estate planning and include the district in, we want to be able to help the district more, and we just need help getting that word out. So take a couple of brochures if you know, maybe a retired colleague, elderly family member that graduated from Alder or something. We'd love to have help spreading the word so we can do even more projects with Carla. So that is the foundation.
Thank you very much.
Carla, what's the date next coming? It's that
November
Tuesday before.
26th. And there was something in the board, I'm gonna keep putting it in the board update, so
Okay.
I'll send you something too.
Okay.
Okay, up next we have, presuming, Mr. Predovich and the master facility plan update.
Good evening. If you don't mind, I'm going to take this podium, I'm going to slide it over a little bit so you guys can see the screen. Okay. How's that? Does that work okay? Great. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present and give you an update. What I'm learning is, as Jim and I work together, I need to prepare myself for the fact that he's probably going to steal the first 5 minutes or whatever it was I was going to talk about. He did a great job of kind of summarizing what we've been working through as far as our community advisory team. What I want to do tonight is I'm trying to give the board an overview and keep you updated on where we are in the process, right? Because ultimately, this whole process is set up to support you. It's here to allow for you to have the confidence that your communities had an opportunity to be a part of this and to be involved and to have a say in what are going to be the next 40, 50 years of impact to your district. And so with that in mind, we have a process that's been very successful, and it starts by this creation of teams, which I've talked to you about. Obviously, I've been here to present to you a number of times to talk to you about where we are throughout all of this. Right now, where we are is in the red bar here, the community advisory team and master plan development. As Jim mentioned, we've had 3 meetings so far, and we're on track for a 4th, where I believe we're going to get to what we think will be the strongest master plan option to be able to present to the board for consideration. So key dates, as Jim has mentioned, we started in September, had a meeting in October, November, and then we have our final meeting in December. And to Jim's point, this process is difficult because there's a lot of information that has to be delivered in order to get all of us to the same level of being able to appreciate the sort of impacts of decisions. And what does it mean when we talk about a shift in enrollment? What does it mean when we talk about a shift in cost? What are those impacts? And so I think your team has done a fantastic job. I would agree wholeheartedly that Community Advisory Team 3, we had a great group in. They were very focused in getting down into the weeds and figuring things out and trying to really balance and weigh the different options that were on the table. What I want to do tonight is I want to talk with you a little bit about the sort of high arching conversation that we're having and then why that's leading to the master plan options that we're discussing. I think you guys have seen these slides, so some of this is going to be just a refresher, but we always talk about there's usually sort of 3 or 4 key drivers as to why a district is considering master planning. And so educational delivery for your district is changing. You've gone through all kinds of professional development over the last couple of years. And we went through this educational visioning process expressly for the purpose of understanding what changes are affecting you and how those are going to affect future facility needs. The second thing is obviously enrollment is increasing, right? We've talked about this as a team. We're on the order of 13 to 14% of increase projected out over the next 10 years. And so we have to recognize that and appreciate it, but also understand the timing of it, because I think that's sort of the key driver here. And then the last thing that we've been focused on is the fact that your existing facilities aren't getting any cheaper to maintain or to repair. Right? And your buildings, because of all that work that you did in the early 2000s, and now a lot of these systems are getting to the end of their useful life. So 20-year warranty on the roofs, some mechanical, electrical systems that have a 15, 20, 25-year life, we're starting to get to this end of life. So all of these things are sort of part and parcel as we talk about this conversation. We did have an opportunity to take a look at facility needs, and we were really focused kind of on the sort of the highest level of saying, you know, the sort of three biggest drivers traditionally in facility costs is typically the roofing, it's typically HVAC, and it's typically the site. Those are typically the three places where you can say those are sort of the highest dollar amounts of impact that you're going to see when we project out over the next 10 years of your facility's life. And you know, we were able to recognize, or at least go down through and sort of appreciate that there's a good $28–30 million worth of work that's going to be done, but it'll be spread out over years, right? You know, you're not going to immediately go out and replace a roof the day that the warranty goes up. You're going to watch it, and you're going to pay attention to it. If you reach a point where it can't be maintained, then you've got to plan for replacement, right? This is the same thing for the HVAC, it's the same thing for the site. Folks don't appreciate that when we have this much pavement all the way around this high school, that when we have to get on a systematic kind of process of you know, maintaining lots, we're sealing them, we're going back and we're milling and filling, and we're going to replacement when it comes to the point where we can't repair. And there's just a significant amount of cost there. And so that's why we follow up sort of on these three categories. But these are things that, again, I think it's important for folks to understand, so that when the question comes up of, hey, school district, why aren't you just reaching into the general fund and buying a new addition for this building? You guys have to plan for the next 10 years of general fund dollars that have to be spent just on the facilities that you have, not new, right? And that's why, as we're working through this process, that's why we're involving the community, because there's going to be an ask, because it's ultimately going to get to the point where you know, we need the community's assistance with a bond issue. We talked at length, I know with this group, about the enrollment projection. Effectively, over the next 10 years, you've got about a 13.25% increase. You know, we've talked about our confidence level with the enrollment projections. You brought on a second enrollment projection specialist who feels like these numbers are appropriate. And so these are still the numbers that we're using for planning as we go through this process. So Alder's ultimately scheduled right now to grow from a district of about 2,300 students to about 2,600 students. And so that's the realization, right? That's what we're trying to appreciate as we talk about the next 10 years. And I think, you know, the slide that I keep coming back to is that what we're trying to understand is, what does that look like in our existing buildings so that we can plan better for the future? And what I'm here to tell you is that you are going to be over capacity by roughly about 50 or 60 students at the end of that 10-year enrollment projection. Now, what you will hear from your staff is that your buildings are at or over capacity in different areas right now, and it has to do with the way that they're being used versus the way that the commission looks at them as far as their ability to hold students. So, you know, we talk about the fact that Monroe and Plain City Elementary and Canaan, none of those buildings were designed to have those spaces that can handle a 12-student group or an 8-student group or a 4-student group. So now a lot of things are happening in the classroom because that classroom is available, and so we're not as efficient as saying, well, we've got 25 kids in every classroom. It doesn't work that way. You know, you are very efficient at elementary, you get a little less so at middle school, and very inefficient at high school because we have things called electives, right? We have all kinds of things that the students are able to sort of make choices about, and ultimately those might lead to a path of only 12 students sort of taking that elective for that period. So now that's a classroom that can hold 25, so it has capacity for 25 students, but it might only have 12 in it at any one period. There might be periods where it's sitting empty. That happens in a school, it happens in a high school specifically. But when we get to the end of this enrollment projection, you are going to be maxed out from a capacity standpoint of looking at every one of those classrooms saying they could all hold 25 students. And that's working with OFCC. We've used these diagrams, I've been using them probably for about the last decade to talk about your configuration. I know you guys have seen these, but effectively this is looking at preschool all the way through 12th grade, and it looks at your facilities And so the green is projected and the white is capacity. And so when you look at the green versus the white, you're gonna see that we are over capacity in almost every building. I think maybe the one exception might be here at the high school, where we're projected to be about 10 students under. But we're gonna be over with every other facility. And so as we look at that, that's our first major impact that we've got to think about in thinking about facility improvements. We started by telling the community advisory team, or explaining to them what the OFCC, what Ohio Facility Construction Commission, understands to be the next phase of your master plan. And because we did renovations and additions at Monroe, we built Plain City Elementary, we did renovations and additions at Canaan, this building was constructed, their understanding of what you need is a replacement building for your 7-8 junior high. That is their understanding of your grand master plan, right? And so what that is, that becomes their base master plan recommendation. And so they're using the enrollment to say, you need a new junior high for 416 students. And the cost for that is roughly about $27 million. Included in that cost, it's building the new facility, and then it's abating and demolishing the existing building if you choose to do that. That's an allowance. It's not a requirement. You can do whatever you'd like to do with that facility. But ultimately, the state's gonna help you co-fund abatement and demolition of it if you choose to move forward.
Josh, I think it's important that you can do whatever you like with that facility as long as it's not used for educating students.
Yes,
Correct?
unless that's baked into the master plan, right? If we were to look at that facility and say we're gonna put a massive addition on it or something else and it became part of the master plan, you could still do that, but you're right. If we're talking about building a new facility, they're expecting that all of the educational needs for your 7th and 8th graders are happening in that new facility, not as part of the old building and the new. Otherwise, then the old building comes into factor, right? Comes into play in the master plan. So ultimately, what we've done is, again, starting with that base level of information, this $27 million project. When you look at that, take a look at the numbers, because Alder was very smart in doing what they did with segment 1, which you guys have presented on at length. Not going into detail on that, other than to say you locked in at 54% state, 46% local, which right now that would be significantly reversed. You would be paying more local share if you were still not in an OFCC program. But as you look down through all the costs that are associated with this, the main thing that I want you to focus on is underneath at the very bottom where it says local share and state share, that's the 46% versus the 54%. That $14.5 million number, that's the amount of credit that you're going to build up as part of the program that you're in right now. Right now you are in between segment 1 and segment 2, meaning that you're in what we call expedited local partnership, meaning that you lead with your money and you generate credit. And that credit is for your use when you get to segment 2. And so today, you would be, as a district, paying the $27 million for the agreement that you're going to get your state share on that amount of money when segment 2 starts, okay? And so we've been consistent again in saying, this is how that impacts, these are the things that are gonna be important in that. So that base level of information, we've gone through a series of exercises. We started with a community values exercise. We did a couple of master plan strengths and weaknesses exercises. And this last meeting, we did a little this or that. It's a little exercise that I work with community advisory teams on when we have master plan options that are very similar sort of in their makeup. There may be some nuances between how they're put together. And so I've asked the teams to say, okay, you've got an A1 and an A2. What's the differences? What are the strengths? Why are we as a district behind one or the other? So that we can get from 10 master plans down to 5 master plans, which we were able to do a little bit better than that. But basically what we did is we provided each of the teams with a sheet that looked like this, has that master plan option up above, it has all the costs associated with it. We've started to talk about local funded initiatives. Local funded initiatives are going to be those things that you as a district are going to spend 100% of your money on outside of the co-funded project. So for instance, if you're going to go buy a new site, that's not something the state will help you co-fund. If you wanted an auditorium added to this building or any other facility, the state doesn't recognize auditoriums, so they're not going to help you co-fund that. So we're talking about these different LFIs that we are recommending versus some of the things that we think are optional. In that optional category is also talking about the district office and the future of the district office, whether that be at 340 West Main as part of your future, or if that becomes part of some other aspect of the master plan. We're trying to recognize that as we go through this. So With that, we started the day with Community Advisory Team number 3. We started with 10 master plan options. I'm not going to go into all the details on these. What I want you to recognize is that for each of these master plan options, there's a certain nuance of them being very similar and a few key differences. So if you look at A1 and A2, for instance, A1 is that OFCC-based master plan option. And the issue that we have there is that at the end of the 10-year enrollment projection, you are going to be over capacity as a district. So imagine what that means. We go 10 years, we go through this enrollment, we see the enrollment increases, and then at the end of 10 years, we're out of space. And so not only have we asked our voters to help us here in 24, 25, we're now going to be asking our voters to help us in 34, 35, or even before that, because if we're going to get to our enrollment projection at the end of that 10-year projection, we probably need to back up 2 or 3 years so that you can start thinking about facility improvements that meet that need in year 11. Right? We've talked a lot about what year 11 means, because year 11 in Master Plan A1 is a problem. It's a problem for your district. And I don't think there's any appetite for any school district to go back to the voters multiple times within a 5-year window. Right? We just don't want to be in that position. There are districts that are doing it. Some of them are being successful at it. But I don't think that most school districts in the state really have the stomach for trying to do that. So A1 was this idea of the new junior high, the base master plan. A2 looks at trying to build in capacity, and that's what we've discussed. How do we build capacity in so that year 11 we're not already full, and thinking about another potential impact of another bond issue for more facilities. So A2 looks at additions to almost all the buildings, right? We build a new 7-8, we put additions on to get capacity in each of the existing buildings. And we've been using a number of about 80%. Okay, what I'd like to see in some of these master plan options is we'd like to have sort of 20% of growth. If our next 10 years of enrollment looks at like 13, then we'd like to think about the next 5 to 7 years after that looking at like 20%, because then I think it allows you some freedom to say, we believe that we're not going to be back to the voters in 10 years or 15 years, maybe even longer than that. So if we look at B and C1, these two master plan options are paired up. This actually looks at a 6, 7, 8 concept that has some differences. You see on B, we're talking about Monroe and Plain City staying as elementary schools, but potentially having less grades in them so that we build capacity in them. Then Canaan moves down to a 4-5, and we put an addition on Canaan, which then provides capacity there. And then we talk about additions at the high school, which you'll see. So anything that you see in red, that's new, right? Anything that's blue is your existing. C1 looked at multiple elementary school configurations, so Monroe, Plain City, and Canaan all being PK5s. That would allow us to build some capacity in, and that new middle school is a 6-8, and the additions to the high school. There were some tough ones that we kind of put out in front of the team because I wanted to test them. I wanted to get some idea of what they're, sort of where they were thinking and if they were capturing or understanding the exercise. C2 and D were not good master plan options. We put them out there because we wanted to look at what their impact was really at the elementary school level. But C2 looked at moving 8th grade up so that we became a high school of 8-12, which I don't think anybody was really overjoyed with the way that would work. And then D looked at moving 9th grade down into a middle school so that we would create capacity here as at 10, 11, 12 with freshmen being in with the middle school students. Both of these were not well received, but it garnered some good conversation. And I appreciate that. That was a tough group. I felt for that group. E1 and E2, conversely, had a lot of conversation about this concept of potentially building a new high school and ultimately turning this building into a middle school and potentially having sort of 6, 7, 8 in this building, and then looking at what that does on the elementary school side, whether it's reconfiguring Monroe and Canaan and Plain City all being the same grade band, or looking at Monroe and Plain City just being PK3 and then Canaan still keeping 2 grades at 4-5. So these are all good options, and I think really good discussion. F1 and F2, looking at, if you look on the 7, 8, and 9, 12 side of it, that master plan is the same. The differences are on the PK6 side of it. So Monroe and Plain City staying as elementaries, but PK3, getting 80% capacity, and then doing a new intermediate school, which is a 4-5-6 building. And then on the F1, Monroe Elementary, Plain City Elementary, and then potentially a new elementary. So maybe even going out to Darby Station earlier than we'd sort of discussed. And putting a new elementary school out there, and then seeing the impacts, obviously, at Canyon and at the high school. So all good concepts. I think all of them ultimately had merit. We also then obviously had a master plan summary where we talked about capacity. Again, what does year 11 look like in these buildings? And you can see for each of the options, we listed out the cost, and then we also listed out what we anticipated that 80% or 85% capacity to be. And so you can see master plan option A1, which is that base master plan option from the commission, has you at negative 49 students, meaning we're at or over capacity in our facilities. And then the rest you can see hover somewhere between the mid 400s to the upper 600s. But that's what this exercise is. It's about how much capacity are we building in, and what's our appetite for looking at the cost impact of that, right? Because the more capacity that we build in, potentially the more expensive some of these options are going to be. And some of that, there's some nuances to how that all works out. So going into master plan, going into Community Advisory Team 4, we're down to 5 major master plans, which I think ultimately 2 of them are really similar, and they're probably going to get weeded out very early on. I mentioned A2. This is the one that has additions basically at all of the buildings and building a new 7-8. So we'll talk about that. There's some pros and cons for how this could work. You know, the team brought up this idea that, hey, everybody sees something, right? All of the buildings see some improvement, and there was a positive there. We also talked about that as a negative, right? Now we're working at every building, and so as we hire a contractor, we're now asking them to manage, 4 different additions plus a new building, and all of that happening exactly at the same time effectively. That's a challenge, right? That's a challenge for any entity that's going to come and take on that work, but it's also a challenge for you as a district because you're going to feel construction everywhere. We looked at C1, talked about the pros and cons of this one. There were a lot of conversation about what, this concept that you've seen a couple of different master plans of Monroe, Plain City, and Canaan all being elementary schools, and what that looks like from a transportation standpoint and a effectively a catchment area standpoint for each of those buildings. And there are pros and cons to that, and I think it really needs to be thought about. The challenge here is that I'm not sure that this master plan option, at least in my mind, allows us to consider Darby Station and where that, why we purchased that land and thinking about what that growth is in that area of the district. I'm not sure this master plan really helps us get to that next step, if that is our next step of evolution. But there are some positives there that I think have value. E1 and E2, you take a look at these guys, again, it comes down to what's happening at grades PK5, right? The idea of a new high school and then converting this building to the junior high, whether that's through an addition or through a new building. Where is that located? Can we fit that on this site? That's something that we're still investigating. But when you look at the elementary school configurations, it's really just, that same concept of the 3 elementaries, or thinking about Monroe and Plain City going to PK3s and Canaan still staying as a 2-grade building. And then lastly, F1 was the master plan option selected out of the 2 F1, F2 groups. Again, looking at additions at the high school, additions at Canaan, and then Monroe and Plain City with 80% capacity, and then that idea of moving out to Darby Station in this phase with a new elementary school that would be of a comparable size to Plain City Elementary, a little bit larger. So, again, I'd like to echo that your community advisory team, the last meeting, we got to that level of conversation that I was hoping we could get to. We're asking the right questions. I think there's a lot of really good conversation and thinking about what the future holds and how to handle this idea of capacity. And I'm confident. I know it's going to be stressful. That next meeting, and there's going to be a lot of information that we're going to have to get through quickly in order to be able to get to a recommendation. But I'm confident we're going to get there. I think we've got some really good master plan options to investigate. And so my recommendation to the board, what I would ask is, I would like an opportunity to kind of look at 2 things. One would be to come and present to you at a work session and really get into the details on this, really talk and even more at length about the things that your teams are discussing as part of these master plans. Because tonight I'm kind of scratching the surface. We're just talking about a very high level. So I'd like to come to you and present those, because what I don't want to do is have a master plan recommendation that's a surprise to the board. It's never our goal. we always want to make sure that we're keeping you in the same lockstep with your team so that we all understand why the conversation is going the way that it's going. The last thing that I'd like to talk about is the potential of doing a community presentation, I think sometime November, December, early December, so that we can present these ideas and help the community at large, just get an opportunity to provide some feedback if possible. So with that, Community Advisory 4 is December 5th. It's going to be here in this room. And we're going to be at the December 9th board meeting, and I hope to be there with a recommendation. And at that point in time, it's always the option of the board to listen to the recommendation and to take some time to chew on it. Just understand that Mark's team has a January filing deadline, so that we are going to proceed forward and think about being on in May. This information is going to get in the hands of the county auditor so that math can be done and we can be successful in making it to the ballot, which used to be. So with that, I'll make one last plug for the planning tool. Everything that we've done, all of our presentations are all on the elevateauditor.com website. And we've been trying to make sure that anytime that we make a presentation, whether it's community advisory team or tonight's presentation, it's all going to be up there so that folks can track the process and understand sort of what your teams and what your communities are talking about as we go through this. Questions? Steve?
Yeah, Josh, real quick, how are you incorporating what we did with educational visioning into these plans? I mean, we had the community involved in that, and help me make the link between the two.
Sure. So in educational visioning, we came up with big ideas, right? And so what we've been asking the teams to do, we did a little bit with this last exercise, and we're going to do a lot more with the final exercises. But we're asking them to say, okay, understanding those big ideas, how do these master plans perform, right? There were a lot of questions about, we've talked about this concept of making sure that we can build in some of that flexible space that is necessary in order to educate the way that we understand your professional development team is sort of headed down the path. The dollar amounts that we're using, I feel confident in the size of the facilities and programs that we're talking about. I feel confident that we're going to be able to support that. But we will be going back to the big ideas and continuing, because if you remember, we always talk about educationally fantastic, financially responsible, community developed and supported. That educationally fantastic component comes first. And those ideas that came out of educational visioning are going to be used as a measuring stick for our final master plan options.
Okay. It sounds like though it will be in some buildings and maybe not in others. Is that correct?
I think one of the conversations that we will have is when we discuss whatever our sort of final couple of master plan options, what they look like. We will discuss if there's an opportunity to go back into any buildings that aren't being touched, or whether or not there might be some ability to go back and say, if we're able to get to 80% capacity, for instance, at Plain City Elementary, there's now an opportunity where we have some classroom space that's been opened up. Do we have an opportunity to go in and make an intervention that supports your educational visioning and maybe provide some of that flexible space until you start to see that enrollment creep back in and then have to go back to traditional classrooms? Can they support something else? That's a great question. Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
What I'll share with the board is what Josh and I shared earlier this morning, are those 5 options. I know that Josh went through them pretty quick this evening, but I'll get those to you this week. And then maybe myself, Carla, Mark, Sonia, and Bill can answer other questions from the board about what these really mean. And then when we come in on the 26th with Josh, then we can be better prepared with our questions to work through each of these different options.
They are still up at, all those designs are up at Elevate Alder.
There,
right?
yeah. Community Advisory Team 3 is up, and we'll try and get board presentation up hopefully tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Before we do our 5-year forecast, I just want to say that Mr. Engel, you very humbly gave credit for the Auditor State Award to Mrs. Ari and Mrs. King, but I just wanted to thank you personally. I don't think there's been a moment since you joined our district where we've asked you a question and you haven't responded promptly. with numbers in a graph form for people like me who are not good with numbers. And that takes time and effort. I watched your work during the negotiation contract, and you kept us all steady and on task and within budget. So all of the monthly updates have been amazing, but also your responses to the board members' concerns have also been incredible too. So thank you.
I appreciate the board support, and this is good. It's a relationship that every district needs to the board and treasurer. So I definitely feel that here. So thank you guys. I promise this is the last one for tonight. We can get into voting on some items. So we're going to go over the general fund 5-year forecast. So this covers fiscal year 25 to 29. If you've been through one of my presentations before, some of this will be pretty familiar. I'm going to try to change it up a little bit. But the purpose of this is to engage the board in long-term planning. It is very key that the board understands where we've been financially and where we plan on going, so we can make big decisions on terms of our facilities, our staffing, and anything that deals with providing the best education we can for our students. It also serves as a basis for me as the chief fiscal officer to sign what's known as a 412 certificate. So for instance, the collective bargaining agreement that is up for vote tonight, that requires me to sign a certificate saying that we can pay it. And they use the 5-year forecast as a determination factor of if we're able to afford it, which we can, which I'll get into. And then also, Ohio Department of Education and Workforce and the Auditor State, they do monitoring of fiscal health of school districts across the state. So they do look at our forecasts pretty rigorously to see if there's any warning signs where they would need additional help. Try to catch it early on, so if there's cuts that are needed, not as drastic, or can provide any support that they might need. When you look at the forecast, we do have 3 years of actual data and 5 years of projected data. The actual data is important because you can see the history. You can see if there's been any changes in terms of our revenues or expenses, and have some kind of explanation of why they occurred, if it's a blip, if it's an anomaly, or it's something that we're planning on continuing going forward. And then of course our projections are what they are. This is what we expect to land at the end of the period. But it is very important to know that the closer you are in time in the projections, the sharper the image is. That's because we have a better idea today of the data. When we get down to 5 years down the road, we're talking about 2 different state budgets. We're talking about, we have a levy that would need to be renewed. It's going to be on the ballot in 26. There's a lot that can happen that would vastly impact the numbers. So while we use the data that we have today to make the best educated projections, just do know that these are projections based on the data that we have today. I'm going to get into the key line items, revenue and expenditures being the 2 key line items. Within our revenue, we've got 2 main sources, local and state funding. I'm going to touch into both of those. And then our expenditures are salary, wages, benefits, purchase services. I'll touch base on that as well. Before I get into the projections, I want to review our previous forecast from May. Our fiscal year ends in June, so we have a forecast done in May. A month later, we're closing the books. So it's a good time to kind of see where we landed. Overall, on track, revenues came in 1.8% higher than expected. A lot of that has to do with a pilot payment from Amazon for the facility in Union County. I know it was coming sometime in calendar year 24, but I don't know if it's hitting in fiscal year 24 or fiscal year 25. To be conservative, I'll put it in fiscal year 25. It came 2 weeks before we closed. So it's a good problem to have, but that's factored in my forecast going forward. And our interest rates also remain high. I was expecting the Fed to take action a little bit sooner than they did. They ended up cutting interest rates in September and then also just a couple days ago. But because they didn't take that action sooner, we saw more interest revenue, which is not a bad thing. When I get down to expenditures, we came in 1.6% over. A lot of that has to do with our personnel services, where we had employees leaving the district who got paid out on their earned contracts in June. Typically, like if you're a teacher, you work August through May, you earn your contract, you pay that out during the summer. So it's split over 2 fiscal years. However, if you're retiring, you get that all paid out when you leave. So that got hit in June, so we couldn't spread it out. You okay, Jim? That happens, that's okay. You know, it's just a shifting of cost from one fiscal year to the other. And then we got our capital outlay, a big decrease there from projection. And that's because we were utilizing our other funds to take pressure off the general fund. So we used to buy our buses out of the general fund. We have a permanent improvement levy that's on the books that we use instead. So instead of committing general fund dollars for bus purchases, for instance, we're able to use a different source of funds. So bottom line, we came in higher than we finished the year higher than expected in terms of a surplus, which is good. That means added to we brought in more money than we spent, and we brought in more than we expected. We spent a little bit more expected, but not as much as we brought in. So we're still very healthy financially. Our revenue versus expenditure trend, that's what we call the alligator. So you see our lines are pretty well matching up. We've had our revenues come in higher than expenditures the last couple of years. Part of that being our high interest rate environment, also our COVID grants. We're able to shift some funds over to find different sources of revenue. But those grants are done. Now all those expenses are coming back to our general fund, so our expenses are going up. Our revenue has done a good job keeping up, but it's largely flat, and that's true for any school district based on how school funding is handled. We also have an income tax, part of our income tax expiring in December 26. By law, I cannot assume the levy will be renewed, so we have to take that off the forecast, which is why there's a large dip there. For our general fund revenue sources, I'm expecting about $32.5 million in revenues, mostly from local sources, so that's the property tax or income tax. State sources are about 31%. This breakdown has been pretty consistent for the last 10 years or so. I want to get into a little bit more in terms of our state funding because we're going into a budget season in Columbus. So last fiscal year, our state funding was $8.9 million. Very healthy. It reflected our enrollment growth as more students come in. The formula pays us more. The state legislature also did what's known as a base input update. So they were basing costs on fiscal year 22. They updated that to 2023. So which means is that they pick up more of the tab. So we're doing good there. This year, however, we're down to $8.5 million. Now that dip is because our local wealth factors have gone up. Our incomes have gone up, our federal adjusted gross income has gone up, our property values have gone up, and because of that, the formula expects us to pick up more of the tab. That's how the formula is made. The idea is that the districts that need the more support will get the more support, and then they expect the better off districts to have more local support. I highlighted in green the transitional aid guarantee and the transition supplement. Those are two what's known as guarantees. By law, we cannot receive less than our fiscal year 21 state funding. So that's why we're essentially getting an initial $558,000 to bring us back to that level, which is great, except for the problem is our expenses hasn't stayed at fiscal year 21 levels. So that's the problem we're running into. So as I said, the state legislature, they're going to be doing another update, do the 2-year budget. We'll see what they come down with. Our expenditures for fiscal year 25, I'm expecting $29.9 million. So there has been some growth there. Wages and benefits have about 80% of our budget, which is consistent with the last couple of years. Most of our expenses are going to be staff because we're an education business. We don't make things, we educate, and that takes people. I want to point out our services pie slice. I'm expecting that to become a bigger part of our overall expenditures as we go on. Basically what Josh was talking about are the age of our facilities, the major components, the roofing, the paving. We are setting aside money to cover that, but some of these repairs will have to come out of the general fund. And also, our special education population is growing, and their needs something we just can't handle in-house. So we hire, go to outside agencies to provide that service for the 1 or 2 students that need it, which that's not unusual. You know, sometimes you'll see other school districts with higher services, lower personnel, because they're just contracting out more. But I just want to point out that essentially that's where we're heading, to a little bit more services going forward. I know, I want to show this graph because that's 0.75% of our income tax is a huge player in our revenue picture. Assuming that it passes, this is what it looks like. Even though we'll be spending more than we're taking in, we'll still have a healthy fund balance. As you remember, last summer, we had the board pass a cash balance policy, which kind of set parameters of how much cash we can sit on. So the top green bar is our ceiling, 180 days operating cash. So that's about 100,000 a day at the end of the forecast. The red bar is our floor. So anytime in the forecast we fall below that floor in projections, then Dr. Miller and I have to come up with a plan to either cut costs, find new revenue sources, do something to help prevent that from happening. If that levy is renewed, we don't run into those issues. We're well within our bounds, so we're providing that quality education. We're not looking for additional sources of operating cash. I also point that out because, you know, Josh mentioned, you know, this possibility for a bond in May of 25. Bond money cannot be used for operations. So if we go out to the voters and ask for bond money, that can only go towards debt service as associated with our buildings. It cannot be used to pay teachers, buy buses, buy technology, anything that are day-to-day. Now, if that levy is not renewed, our deficit grows exponentially because we're taking out about $1.7 million of revenue annually, or $7 million, a lot of money coming out annually, and then we're down below that floor. So again, even though I cannot forecast that it will be renewed, I just want to kind of point out the impact of that levy on our finances. And a couple of just pitfalls that we, you know, always looking out for. I want to point out labor negotiations. That was not an obstacle for us whatsoever. I've been 5 or 6 negotiations between my old district and here, and this is by far the most positive experience I've had with that. So I do feel our labor relations are strong, and that just helps with our budgeting and planning. So I want to thank JEA for their support there. The one big hurdle that we're seeing is property tax reform. The legislature has formed a select committee. They're due to have a report out by December. We don't know what they're thinking or what they will recommend. There's also the lame duck session in the General Assembly where a bill can be introduced in the morning, get passed in the afternoon, is on the governor's desk the next day. So we're keeping an eye on that, of what they may do in terms of our property tax, because that impact our revenues. State budgets, again, how they want to fund it, if they want to continue with the current funding model, if they want to do something different. We just don't know. We have 2 of those state budgets that are unknown at the time. And of course, levy failure being a huge one, and any major unexpected expense. Again, we do our best to plan, but you can only plan what you know. So that is what I have. Thank you for listening. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank
job, Mark.
you.
Good job.
Okay, section 7, we're moving on to public comments, and I have a public comment from Mackenzie Roush.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Roush. I'm a 9th grader and go to high school here. At the junior high the past 2 years, when I was there, many issues, including bullying, harassment, sexual assault, and much more has happened. When I was at the junior high, I experienced issues with myself, with other students, getting told to kill myself, that they were going to slit my throat, getting body shamed multiple times. And when I reported it, or my parents did, nothing was done, and they treated it like it didn't matter. There have been so many problems with threats like this and not taken seriously at all. All these issues have been reported multiple times than I can count. To add to the situation in 7th grade, I was sitting at lunch minding my own business when a kid started making sexual jokes about the other kid's mom that had cancer. The kid told him to stop, and when he didn't, this led to a fight in the lunchroom. Many kids got bullied for weeks, so they went to Mr. Mulaney and he did nothing, so the same day another fight happened. In 7th grade, another fight happened later on in the year because of bullying. The kid's older brother took care of an issue with the student leading to another fight. The principals didn't find out until a teacher's daughter told her what had happened and the teacher reported it. The kids in all the situations didn't get in trouble, but the victims did. I also got harassed multiple times because of issues outside of school that were reported and no consequences. After I went down to the office asking to call my mom, I sat through multiple meetings with different people sobbing about issues I had faced with students and my friends had faced with problems at the junior high, and there was still no consequence. If anything, I got more of a consequence than anyone because I started getting targeted by the principals for reporting things. I would get yelled at for things I didn't do and just going in the bathroom. It got so bad I hated going to school and would start sobbing in the middle of class because of them. That's one of the reasons kids are very scared about going to them about many issues involving body shaming, which still happens, harassment, bullying, and much more. When they did nothing, my parents had a meeting with Dr. Miller about everything last year, so they would keep an eye on it and keep track of everything that had happened, not being reported or had no consequences. All these issues, plus also having times I personally felt unsafe because of kids saying they were going to rape people, and talking to boys in my grade about which girls they would rape. This all caused me to go into a deep depression, go to therapy every other week, and be put on medication because of how bad my anxiety got. There have been multiple cases of kids not feeling safe at home because of stalking by other students that had been reported and nothing done about. Now that my grade is out of the junior high, I hope things would get better for different grades. I got a text from my sister on November 6th, last Wednesday, that she got told to kill herself by another student. She had also came home and was super upset multiple times from body shaming from these students. She's too afraid to tell anyone or stick up for herself because she saw how I got treated when I would report situations that were serious. There was a list that went around ranking girls from fattest to skinniest made by the boys, so once again, no consequence. Even the boys that knew it was wrong were too scared to say anything, so they wouldn't get blamed for it. Many kids are terrified to get in trouble for something they didn't do because they have seen so many people get in trouble for someone else's situation. If the school district ever wants to get better, they need to fix these issues that have caused multiple people to end up with depression, forced to go online because of anxiety about school. These are just a few of the things I've heard and seen with my own eyes. Please make a difference with helping that school get the help they need before it's too late and something worse happens. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. I don't know if you're aware, but when people have comments, we don't engage in the back and forth with the comments, but I do want to thank you for coming, and I want to tell you that we hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. We do take what you say very seriously. So thank you for sharing with us.
Okay, moving on to section 8, the treasurer's report. Can I get a motion to approve the October 2024 financial report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any conversation? Questions? Roll call.
Mr. Hooley. Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler.
Yes.
Mr. Votak.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to accept the following grants and donations under section 8.02?
So moved.
Second.
The Department of Developmental Demolition Site Revitalization Grant doesn't have a dollar amount, is that because we don't know exactly what it's gonna be yet?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're sharing the board with South Lawn, South Six, is it South Lawn? Yeah, they have a couple smaller projects down there, so they're gonna get a piece of that as well.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you for doing that. That's a huge help.
Okay. Roll call?
Mr. Votak.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler.
Yes.
Mr. Hooley.
Yes.
Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Section 8.03, can I get a motion to approve the 5-year forecast as presented?
So moved. Second.
Comments, questions? Roll call?
Mr. Votak.
Yes.
Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Mr. Hooley.
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
In 8.04, can I get a motion to approve the amended appropriations as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I should say, motion to approve the amended certificate of estimated resources and appropriations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Okay. Do you want to address that real quickly?
Yeah, really quick, just adjusting our general fund appropriations for the 5-year forecast. There was a couple initiatives such as looking to possibly get the central office moved out of the high school starting as early as this year. That involves a cost. So putting that into the 5-year forecast and putting it into their budget, as well as our federal grants. If we don't spend it all in 1 year, it rolls over to the following year. Working with Mrs. Quick and Mrs. Crawl, we do have a plan to spend it all down this year, so we don't have much as a rollover. But that allows us to tap into the rollover funds.
Questions? Roll call?
Mr. Hooley.
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Votak.
Yes.
Mr. McCartney.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Mr. McCartney, do you have a totals update for us?
Yeah, well, first, before I do that, did you guys like that email that I forwarded that Todd has? Has that beneficial? Would you like me to continue doing that? That would be a cool update.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, okay. So, particular note, in 22, Alder had 88 students, and there were 724 students at tolls total, and today, we have 106 Alder students at tolls, and total enrollment is 173 students. So we, as I've told you before, we're currently going through an addition. We're at about 50,000 square feet, of which there's a 2-story, 14,000 square foot addition, where I don't know if you guys are familiar, but where ECE is, the early childhood education. So that'll be an update for early childhood education and nursing, and then also about a 36,000 square foot, that'll give us 4 high bays in the back that are currently designated for welding and construction. And so with that, we will be able to, the plan is to stand up a couple of new programs in the next couple of years. So construction should start hopefully this spring, but it'll move pretty quick. So hopefully by the following school year, we'll be ready to move in.
That's great. thank you. Okay, moving on to the personnel consent items in section 10. We have 10.01 resignations, 10.02 employment, and 10.03 phone stipends. We can discuss those individually, but under 10.04, can I get a motion to approve all the items, and then we can discuss them individually?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Okay. Anyone have any comments and concerns about 01, 02, or 03?
Does anyone know the supplemental contract from the SPAC, are they moving up or down?
These are new.
Oh, they're completely new.
Junior high competition cheer.
Added.
And now we have over
Junior high wrestling.
half a dozen junior high
Right.
females that
Okay.
are interested.
So they're both new, gotcha.
Okay, anything else? Okay, roll call?
Mr. Hooley? Yes. Mr. McCartney?
Yes.
Mr. Votak?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to section 11, new business. Can I get a motion to approve the appointment of Heather Buys to the Plain City Public Library Board of Trustees?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Great, roll call?
Mr. Hooley?
Yes.
Mr. McCartney?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Votak?
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Section 11.02, can I get a motion to approve the agreement with Meta Solutions to provide telephone service to the district for a 5-year period starting July 1st, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Do we get a discount on that because of the 5-year commitment?
And consolidating services. Nicole Schrock, I'd like to give her some credit on this because even before this year, she came to me with a plan, met with several vendors and reps to do this work. And I just asked her to pause on it because it is an expensive purchase. But this year, with significant updates across the district, we did see some pain points with the phones being able to work properly the way we wanted them to with technology updates. So Nicole went back to work on this, working with this rep, and it's gonna be a cost savings over the 5 years.
Thank you, Ms. Schrock. Okay, anything else? Great, roll call?
Mr. Votak?
Yes.
Mr. McCartney?
Yes.
Mr. Hooley?
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And our final new business item, because we made you guys all stay for the whole meeting. 11.03, JAEA collective bargaining agreement. Can I get a motion to approve the agreement between the Board of Education and JAEA effective July 1st through 2025 through June 30th, 2028?
So moved.
Second.
Would you like me to comment?
I would.
I think it was probably early August, Mr. Ingles and I were discussing about negotiations this year. We were discussing master facility planning. We were discussing in 2025 a possible bond issue, and in 26 renewal. And we thought, well, negotiations is on the horizon as well too. And I reached out to Mrs. Lorenz and asked her to think about, let's consider moving this up because, you know, maybe this could be a long process. And Mrs. Lorenz responded with, well, let's consider moving it up and let's consider this interest-based approach, which was a huge hit. And I think Mr. Ingles said it perfectly during your presentation, and I tried to comment on that as well too during my report. just bringing these groups of individuals together and learned that we can get to anything. The contract was cake. Now I feel confident that any obstacle that presents itself, we're gonna be able to work through it. So can't share with the board enough how impressed I am with how this came together and supports both sides. Mrs. Lorenz, would you like to address the board this evening?
Sure. Do you want me to come?
Sure.
So you'll have to forgive me. I tried many times to put this into words and get this experience down on paper, which for an English teacher you would think is an easy task. And really it came down to the fact that like it was almost indescribable how different things were. So instead, I looked at some numbers and I thought I would share those with you. Last time it took us 10 months to get to a tentative agreement, and we did it in 3 days. That's an incredible testimony to everybody that was involved. We were 4 months without a contract last time. We're now, if this is approved tonight, 7 months ahead of our current contract expiration date. And I think the biggest, when I went back and had to dig through some emails, when I looked at, in November of 2022, when we finally got to an agreement, our membership approved that at 73%. And I was thrilled last Tuesday when we got our membership together, and this tentative agreement was approved at a 98% rate. And I think that's just a huge testament to our district's leadership, the board's willingness to work together. Just an incredible collaborative experience. Some of us were there the last time and it was a tough go, and I can't express how different it was, the palpable change. I think Lori Kersey brought to me, she was like, you know, one of these things in the contract, like I have notes from going back to 2005. And she was like, and the response from administration was, of course, yes, we want you to have that, right? And like to feel that support and that respect as professionals, I think our team all felt it, and all of our teachers and our other members in the district feel it. I wish you all could have been there with us on the 5th to just see the joy in the room when we put this in front of our members. It was truly, some of these things were long time coming, and I am so grateful for everyone that was involved in the process, for my team, and several of them are here tonight, to Dr. Miller, Mr. Ingles, Mrs. Walker, Mr. McCartney. I spent many, many additional hours with Mrs. Kroll and Mrs. Quick as we kind of cleaned up the language. Like, I'm so excited for people to actually see this contract. It's clarity is kindness, I think is how Mrs. Kroll put it. And I think it will be so beneficial for our members, for new teachers as they come on board, to understand exactly what it is. I have never been more proud to work for this district than we kind of were like, yes, this is great. So thank you all. I think it's just been an overwhelming process. I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just say the only thing that I'm really disappointed is that I didn't get to participate. I conceded my spots to these two. Thinking next year we'll have negotiations and I can just take it back again. So I'm really disappointed about that, but thank you to all of you, and yeah, we appreciate you.
I think the approach, the collaborative approach, this is my first negotiation. I can't fathom doing it without any other way. That was, knowing the whys is makes a huge difference on any process. Just tell us the whys. But ultimately it comes down to people, and I think everybody came into that room willing to work together and figure it out. And I was very fortunate to be part of that, so thanks. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? Okay, roll call?
Mr. McCartney?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Votak?
Yes.
Mr. Hooley?
Yes.
Mrs. Detweiler?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody. Now, if you guys want to leave early, you're welcome.
Don't let them fool you.
Okay, our next regular board meeting is Monday, December 9th at Canaan Middle School at 5 p.m. And can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Mrs. Detweiler?
Yes.
Mr. Hooley? Yes. Mr. McCartney?
Yes.
Mr. Votak?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
We're adjourned.
Great.